Breaking news! I'm getting word that another small YouTube community has fallen victim to... good god. Drama. Apparently, like booktube, authortube has had its own little drama lately, and this isn't a video about authortube drama. Don't say it, 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 don't say it. Spill the tea, sis. Shit! Truly, this isn't a video about authortube drama. I watched all the videos, there was a lot of stuff I agreed with, some stuff I didn't agree with. Pretty much all of the channels involved are channels that I'm a fan of. But there was one particular tiny thing said in a couple of the videos. It's been a small focal point for some of the drama that this video is kind of based on. If you watch those videos, it'll sound familiar, and it was the point that there are people giving writing advice that they didn't necessarily apply to their own writing. This may sound like a strange point of view, but hear me out. That is something that I think is kind of petty to get worked up about. One of the great things about being a human being is that we have this miraculous thing called improvement. And the thing with improvement is that it essentially means the more you do something, the better at it you will get. When I'm watching writing tips or writing advice from someone, honestly, I don't give a shit if it was applied in their own writing. A, because maybe their writing was done at a time that they weren't aware of this. Maybe they became more educated after finishing the writing. That's something that happens. That's something that I've done. That's kind of what this video is, actually. And really, I just think it's kind of redundant and really has no impact on the person watching the writing advice whatsoever. At the end of the day, no matter what it is, no matter how good their writing is, how bad their writing is, writing advice comes entirely down to you. It is up to you, the watcher, to watch the advice critically, see if it resonates with you, and maybe just take a moment to try and remember if it's familiar in any of the writing that you've seen that is successful. Of course, there's a lot of bad writing advice out there, and of course we can criticize it, but someone that is a bad writer could give great advice. And really, I just don't think it's kind of fair. I think it's kind of a dick move if you were to watch their writing advice, then go read their writing, and then call them out for not using their writing advice in their writing. God, that was a bit of a mouthful. All that matters is whether the writing advice is valuable to you. That's it. Anyway, the reason I'm making this video is because I have given a ton of writing advice that is not prevalent in my writing. And to be fair, I've mentioned it in pretty much all of those videos, like this. P.S. I wish I'd known about most of these before I put some of my books out. Or like this. I want to give a kind of quick disclaimer though. First of all, yes, these are things that I've used in my writing as well, but that's why I think videos like this are so important, so that we can collectively try to find some solutions to these tropes and try to avoid it becoming the norm for all stories. But even if I hadn't mentioned it, I still don't think it really matters. But today I'm taking a moment to quite literally call out all of the flaws that I see in the books that I have so far self-published. Because there are a lot of them. These won't necessarily be spoilers, but if finding flaws in writing is something that you like to do on your own and you are planning on reading my Architects of the Gifted series, then maybe don't watch the rest of the video. This is pretty much just going to be me nitpicking at my own books. So for those of you who don't know, I currently have 2 books out in what is to be a 4-book series called The Architects of the Gifted, which is a pretty classic YA adventure fantasy story. Urban fantasy, if you like, because it runs parallel to our world, just with kind of a secret world that no one knows about. I guess a bit like Harry Potter. It's been described to me from people that have read it as kind of a familiar mix between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, for a bit of an older audience. The first book in that series is The Architects of the Gifted, The Scarlet Reaper, and I'm still confident that it is a good book. I still think the writing was good, the story is creative, although a lot of the characters could use more work, which I'll get into in a second. The general atmosphere of the story that I wanted to get out, I think, was done quite well. And that was that I wanted to do kind of like a buddy adventure, road trip kind of story. You know, I guess a bit like The Hobbit. This will be a bit of a weird comparison, but if you know the video game Final Fantasy, is it 15? The real kind of bro road trip thing, I wanted to do that. A group of guys going on an adventure together and bonding over that and becoming brothers. That's what I wanted. And I think I did that alright. So I'm not going to go into scrupulous detail about the actual plot of the story because, I mean, that would be a whole video in itself. If you want to, I'll leave cards for some videos where I do exactly that. This one's just to talk about the flaws. So the biggest flaw I'm just going to get out of the way entirely is when I first wrote this story, and I wrote this back when I was like 19 or something, which is definitely old enough to not fall into these cliches, tropes, and flaws that I did, but I do want to attribute that to how this happened, because in my time in the last, 5 or 6 years, I have learned so much about writing. And I credit a lot of that to YouTube and watching other people's authortube videos. So I was a bit ignorant about a lot of cliches and tropes, and the biggest one for me was how I treated the love interest, Scarlet. The hero of the story is named Carter, who is a young man, and the motivation for him is to save the life of Scarlet, the young woman. This is the epitome of a damsel in distress. Aside from a very short portion at the start of the story, she has pretty much no role in the rest of the story other than being a prisoner that Carter wants to save. She's barely a character, she's more of a prop, and I hate that I did that. I had a specific goal in mind when I kind of did this. The idea was that I wanted to start with a damsel in distress, and then as the books progress, I wanted to show you what happens after the damsel in distress. I wanted to show you that the trauma of a situation like that could turn her into someone a bit more aggressive, someone who's not going to be a prisoner anymore. That's fine, and I'm sure I could have done that, but I did not execute it well at all in this story. Like I said, Scarlet is more of a prop than a character in this story, and I need to own up to that. The story is also riddled with cliches and tropes, and I know that. A trope that it would probably rule out you wanting to read this book at all is that there is a secret royal family of people whose gifts and abilities are stronger than others. That's, looking back on it, I know. So because this is kind of a centralized road trip story about this group of guys, there aren't a lot of other characters. There's only really kind of 2 female characters in the story, and I don't think that's so much a problem because of how small the cast is, and like I said, it was a buddy bro adventure, so that's what you're signing up for. But there was one other female character that, again, I hate that I did this. Her name is Jade, and she's kind of the polar opposite of Scarlet. She's a cliche in herself that she's the strong, sassy warrior woman. And her attitude shows her as being that, but in the one opportunity she has to actually fight someone in the story, she gets benched so that one of the guys can take her place to protect her, and I hate that I did that. This, I think, is one of the biggest grievances of the story because I did a massive disservice to the character of Jade. And although that was a great moment for the guy, Arthur, because he was... It's kind of... You need to read it to understand it entirely, but that was him showing more care about someone than he did previously. It was kind of a great emotional point, but again, for the character of Jade, it was not good. So those things aside, there are a few other things, like cliches and stuff you could point at, but honestly, like the other stuff, I'm cool with. I'm fine with that being in the story. The story was always going to be kind of a love letter to old fantasy adventures, so it was going to be similar and have tropes anyway. The second book in the series, The Whisper War, I think was an immense improvement from the first one. I knew I had to reverse a lot of the damage I did in the first one. Like I said, I think The Scarlet Reaper was a good book. There was just so much that could have been improved. With the second one, I was working to correct a lot of that. I wanted to make Scarlet a more fleshed out character. I wanted to show that she can be a badass chick without being a warrior, sassy, beat 50 guys on a brawl kind of chick. She's very feminine and very girly, and that is part of her charm, but she still proves herself in that story as being able to look after herself. I introduced a ton more characters that I'm really proud of. It was a lot more diverse. There was a lot more interesting characters. One of the favorite characters I wrote in that story was a large islander man who leaves his husband and his child to go help the core group with their quest. He's your classic he was actually kind of based on someone I knew growing up, but he was always smiling, always optimistic, always happy. It was a lot of fun writing that character. I truly think there were a drastically less amount of flaws in the second story. There are still a few, but the one I'm gonna mention is kind of the biggest, and it just drives me nuts that I did this because it was such an opportunity for just a great character, and I fucked it up. And that is the villain in The Whisper War, who is a charming, charismatic, but slimy guy. Kind of like a Loki, I guess. What made him dangerous was his ability to persuade people. And that wasn't a superpower or a gift, that was just him as a person. It started off so strong, and I truly think he was a great character when you're first introduced to him and when you find out about his motives, but then he kind of drops off the grid until the end of the story again, and then the story kind of wraps up without doing that villain any justice whatsoever. There was a real chance there for me to write a great villain, and I just kind of dropped the ball. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm sure there are plenty more stuff you could pick out in those two books, but those are some of the things that I've identified myself and I want to own up to. And once again, a lot of the writing advice I've given on this channel I think is good advice, but goes against what I've done in the past, and that's because I've grown as a person. Improvement. And I don't think that my writing advice should be discredited because of some crappy writing I've done in the past. So the second book in that series came out a couple of years ago, and I've been taking a very long break from that series. I've written about half of the third book, but because I'm so paranoid about fucking up again, I'm just taking a big break from it. I want to write some other stuff in the meantime. I'm not saying it's going to be like years and years until I finish that series, but maybe next year. I don't know. I don't really want to put a timestamp on it just yet, but I've got other stuff I'm working on. I'm nearly done my psychological horror story, Descend 7. After that, I have a kind of short mystery story I want to write. I want it to be kind of like a set of short stories, kind of like Sherlock Holmes. And then I think after that, I might jump back into The Architects of the Gifted so that I can work towards wrapping up the story of Carter Becker and Scarlet Eccles and Griffin and Arthur and all the other characters that I've grown to really love. Plus, Jade makes a comeback in the third book, and trust me, when she makes her comeback, she's gonna make up for how shitty I wrote her in the first one. Basically, I just want the third story to really be good. I think the first one was okay. It was good. The second one was pretty good, but the third one has to be great. Because I want to expand on that world as well. I plan on doing some spin-offs at some point, and I don't want people to give up on that series, and I don't want people to give up on me as an author just because of the flaws in the first book. So hopefully you're willing to give me a chance. If you read my stories and you found those flaws and you think that makes me a terrible writer, fair enough, but I'm hoping you'll give me another chance in the future because I really do think I've improved. I think I've improved a fucking shit ton. Anyway, this is me facing my writing mistakes. If you're an authortuber, maybe you want to do something similar to this. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll have some more writing tip videos or writing authortube whatever videos coming not too long now. Catch ya.